In 1962, Fidel Castro found himself the leader of a nation in crisis. The US had cut them off completely, and that was a problem, because the United States was Cuba's sole supplier of ice cream. And to say that Castro loved ice cream is a severe understatement. Commonly referred to by historians as Calcium Castro, the revolutionary leader was so captivated by the creamy delight that in response to the US embargo, he made it his purpose to construct the greatest ice cream parlor on earth. A cathedral that would serve 1,000 people at once, in a nation that had never even produced ice cream before. It was insanity, but Castro was not one to take no for an answer. Now, to understand what put Cuba in such a precarious situation, we need to catch you up on some basic ice cream history. In the middle of the 18th century, ice cream started to become extremely popular in Europe. Sure, it tasted great, but it was also partially because doctors saw it as, quote, extremely healthful and would prescribe it to cure various ailments in patients. Yes, I'm being serious. Now, no one knows who introduced ice cream to America, but George Washington and Thomas Jefferson loved it. Jefferson enjoyed vanilla ice cream so much that myths started to spread that he's the one who introduced vanilla beans to the Americas, but that seems highly unlikely. From there, ice cream started to spread rapidly in the United States, particularly because it was more profitable to sell than milk, so people made more and more. In 1859, the year before the Civil War, only 4,000 gallons were produced. 10 years later, this increased to 24,000. In the last year of the century, 5 million. Then the industrial innovations and freezing technology started to be adopted, and by 1919, over 100 million gallons were being made in the United States each and every year. Within just half a century, this commodity went from the hands of the wealthy elite to something that anyone could easily afford. America was easily the #1 ice cream producing and consuming nation on Earth. However, they made so much that it now became profitable to not only sell ice cream locally in the country, but to start investing in building the infrastructure to ship it across the oceans into foreign territories. However, installing freezers on ships that could prevent ice cream from melting was no easy feat. But don't worry, they had someone to help them. None other than the US military. During the Second World War, pretty much every nation banned ice cream production because it was seen as a useless waste of good dairy and sugar. But not the Americans. To them, it felt like home. They understood its power as a serious morale booster on the front line, and they quickly started to mass produce their own ice cream. By 1943, the US military-industrial complex was the world's largest ice cream producer. But the thing was, now they had to transport it, so they threw tons of money and resources at the problem, in the process building a fleet of ice cream ships. In 1945, they spent $1 million on one, the equivalent to over $17 million today. However, when the war came to its end, the ice cream industry now had a blueprint to follow and started to build their very own ice cream fleets. Soon, countries all across the globe would encounter the sweet treat. One of them, closer to the US than others, was Cuba. Ice cream is paradoxical. In the places where it's most needed, that is hot climates, it is hardest to make. Precisely for that very reason. It is hot and ice cream needs to be refrigerated. Because of this, ice cream had existed in Cuba long before the American trade started, but never took off because it was too expensive and troubling to make. It was only made in tiny batches on special occasions. American imports, however, were not only cheaper, but of better quality, and the sweet treat quickly became a part of everyday life. Just like with America's founding fathers, Fidel Castro, the father of the Cuban Revolution, gained a liking to ice cream. This was well known even when he was a young revolutionary operating out of the jungle, proven by the fact that a wealthy donor specifically ordered him an ice cream cake to be delivered to him on his birthday. Once the revolution succeeded in 1959, Fidel would truly develop an obsession. It became his choice dessert after nearly every meal. It was reported that he once had between 18 to 28 scoops in a single sitting. On top of this, every day like clockwork, he would have a chocolate milkshake. It turns out that the CIA learned of this pattern, and it was declassified in 2007 that they offered $150,000 to the heads of the Chicago and Miami crime families to assassinate him. Shortly after this offer, a waiter in Castro's hotel had a poison pill stashed in the freezer. But when it came time to use it, it had frozen to the surface it was on, and when attempting to take it off, it broke in half, preventing the assassination from taking place. Out of the 600 attempts on Fidel Castro's life by the CIA, this was very likely the closest that they came to success. In 1960, President John F. Kennedy was elected president. Tensions of the Cold War were increasing, and 2 years later, a total embargo was placed on communist Cuba, cutting them off from many imports that they depended on, one of which was anything dairy-related, including Fidel Castro's beloved ice cream. He immediately scrambled to find workarounds, sending an ambassador to Canada to purchase and ship 28 containers of his favorite American brand, Howard Johnson's. But that was not sustainable in the long run, and while the Cuban people suffered, Castro saw an opportunity. In the era of the space race, where Russia and America were competing to get a man on the moon, Castro had his sights set on something else. Being cut off completely meant that if Cuba could produce something incredible, that being better than the Americans, they could claim it to be a pure triumph of communism. And he decided that this triumph would be something personal to him, something that he was truly passionate about. You guessed it, ice cream. It would become his space race. But there was just one problem. They had no milk to make it with. They had cows, but they were more for meat than for dairy production. So, using a bit of capitalist free market trade, I know, hard to avoid, right? They imported a few Holstein milk-producing cows from Canada, and a third of them died within weeks. This shouldn't have been a surprise. The Holstein, originating from the Netherlands, could not survive in tropical environments. Once the news of the deaths spread, Castro quickly declared that they would need to breed them with native cows to produce, quote, the tropical Holstein. Now, while that was going into place, Castro was also on a quest to build something that would truly become his magnum opus, a legacy, an ice cream parlor so large that it could serve 1,000 people at once. Nothing even close to this existed anywhere in the world. He delegated the task to Celia Sanchez, who previously rebooted the Cuban cigar industry. She sent technicians to Canada to learn how to make different flavors and bought top-of-the-line machinery from Sweden and the Netherlands. They also studied freezing technologies and invested heavily in them. The construction of this ice cream cathedral would take approximately 6 months. Named after Sanchez's favorite ballet, it would be called Coppelia. Meanwhile, breeding was not going great. Castro honed in on this pursuit with an obsession that rivaled his for ice cream, and then they hit the jackpot. A cow by the name of Ubre Blanca, meaning white udder. The cow was not only producing a lot of milk, but was setting world records. It was heralded as a national hero. While the Americans and the Russians valorized astronauts, the Cubans did so with this cow. Kept in a guarded, air-conditioned stable, journalists would cover its everyday life. This Ubre Blanca was proudly used as evidence of the superiority of communism. However, unfortunately, this cow was an anomaly. They were not able to make lightning strike twice. But with the investments in the industry, they had enough dairy now to make ice cream, and that's all that really mattered. In 1996, Coppelia had finally opened its doors. Fidel Castro told a visiting journalist, "Before the revolution, the Cuban people loved Howard Johnson's ice cream. This is our way of showing that we can do everything better than the Americans." And indeed, the ice cream was better. Even the US visitors conceded that Coppelia was likely serving the best in the world. It had dozens of flavors and sent them to international food festivals, foreign dignitaries, and friends to the revolution, such as Ho Chi Minh of Vietnam. In its resounding success, they claimed to serve around 4,250 gallons of ice cream a day to 35,000 people. During peak times of traffic, customers would need to wait in line for 2 hours or more. Castro had finally achieved the dream that his sweet tooth had possessed him with for years. But in other facets of life, this dream collapsed around him. He failed to breed a consistent milk-producing cow, and with world events such as the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba would lose a key trading partner and the economy fell onto really hard times. This meant pulling back on subsidizing the dairy industry, meaning less milk for production. Now, today, Copelia still makes ice cream, but less. Their once sprawling menu of over 30 flavors is at times reduced to just 3: vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate. However, it still holds on to its title as the largest ice cream parlor in the world. The line to order snakes outside each and every day, just as it has for decades. It is described as the type of place to take a first date, or to go out after a party, which does make me wonder, how many marriages are there whose roots are tied to this relic of the space race? Now, if you're watching this and you have ever been to Copelia, please leave a comment. I would love to hear about your experience, and I'm sure that many others watching this would as well. I really hope you enjoyed this video despite it being shorter than the larger scale grandiose ones I usually make. It's a breath of fresh air to me and hopefully to you as well. It allows me to tell the stories of the cool things I can't properly squeeze into the larger videos, so let me know if you like this format or not. As always, I will see you in the next one.